Dear friend, before we get to the story, I'll ask you to like and subscribe to the channel. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me. Somehow we got stuck with organizing the first spring barbecue. It's me, Ronald Wilson, nicknamed Ham, but I'll talk about that later. My wife Haley was very pleased with herself on this 1st of April. We were married for almost 3 years and bought our house right after the Christmas holidays. Haley and I loved our house, and especially our little cul-de-sac in Natalbany, Louisiana. I know it's too loud. It's funny, but we were about 12 kilometers on the other side of Albany, on Interstate 55. So most of the locals joked that the first people who settled there must have hated Albany for some reason, but were too dumb to pronounce the word no. There were several couples about our age living in the area, some with children and some without. We were one of those couples, and Haley stopped taking birth control at the end of February so we could start a family. We received a lot of criticism from our neighborhood friends and both sets of parents. I was cooking on the grill, a brand new grill, which was grilled and smoked on wood pellets. It was a joint Christmas gift from Haley and her parents. I looked around my yard, watching 15 or 20 neighbors having fun and having a great time while I turned and tamped the brisket. I was about to serve alligator tail snacks when I realized I needed to take a leak. When I turned into the corridor, I stopped abruptly. Right outside the bathroom door, Dane Wilson was romantically kissing Haley. His hand was under her blouse, and I realized that Haley hadn't worn a bra to the celebration. Why was my wife kissing my friend? That was the only question I asked myself before I took action. In the blink of an eye, I was next to him, grabbed him by the back of the head, and slammed him against the wall a few centimeters from my wife's face. Unfortunately, the impact hit the door jamb, not the drywall, and Dane's nose shattered as he went limp. Before he could fall to the floor, I kicked him hard in the scrotum. After he fell to the floor, almost unconscious, I kicked him a few more times to make sure. During all this commotion, most of our guests had already gathered in the house. I was being held and dragged away by at least 3 guys, and Haley was sobbing and howling. 3 or 4 neighborhood guys dragged me out the back door onto the porch. I was worried about snacks. At that moment, I was worried about several things that I will talk about later, although, despite the fact that I spent so much money on the brisket, I did not want it to overcook. The men held me for several minutes while there was a commotion inside. I heard someone calling an ambulance and putting wet towels on. Haley was still screaming, "Oh my God!" I eventually convinced my worried neighbors that I was okay, so they led me to the stairs leading down to the backyard and told me to stay put. A few moments later, I heard the wail of several sirens. You might have thought that in a small town like Louisiana, you would be able to protect your wife's virtue in your own home. But it turned out that this was not the case. A policeman I knew from high school, Harley, handcuffed me, making it clear that he was very sorry. I was detained at the local sheriff's office and thrown into a cell while waiting to be taken to the county jail. My dad wouldn't understand, so I called my cousin Jared. I told him what had happened so that Dad would hire me a lawyer. Later, when I was in the county jail, I was calm enough to think, why the hell was my wife kissing Dane? I had no idea that she would do something like that. She was always so loving and gave me a lot of attention. It must be because of that jerk, Dane. We've been hanging out a bit since we moved to this dead end. We played darts at the local pub and went river fishing a few times. What I knew about him wasn't much. We only talked about men's affairs. I knew that he grew up in the suburbs of New Orleans and that he attended a prestigious law school in the north. He never finished school because his father's business went bankrupt. One thing you will learn in our wilderness is to notice how a person behaves. If there was one thing I didn't like about Dane Woodson, it was the way he behaved to me there on the river. But in the company of people, he was a different person. Unlike that movie, I didn't get a scholarship. We never made the state team. Our team sucked except for me and the quarterback, and at the end of the season we lost 6-5. Our town was too small for scouts to waste their time. I never minded because I had a lot of friends and I was known as the elephant in the china shop. Marley stayed by my side throughout the release. She was on her way to the University of Texas, so we said goodbye quietly, although she kept in touch during her freshman year. She was also the one who convinced me to go to a local college. I really liked this girl. My next encounter occurred right after the end of the last semester before getting my bachelor's degree. It was a stupid bar fight, and I'm still worried about why I got into it instead of running out the door. I didn't have any friends at the bar, and although I knew a lot of guys, I didn't take part in the fight. I was drunk and furious when I got hit on the head with a beer bottle. However, luck was on my side again, as the judge dealt with the instigators and released about 15 of us with a warning. The charges remain in our records. So I sat and waited for the morning to escape and talk to my wife. But this did not happen. Dad couldn't find me a lawyer that fast or didn't try very hard, but I ended up hiring a public defender. Judge Tubbs had an angry expression on his face as the prosecutor read out the charges and talked about Dane's injuries. I must have gone a little crazy. "Mr. Wilson," he said to me, "I am not inclined to allow bail in this case. It is assumed that you will try to escape." I went to my lawyer and told him that I could barely afford gas, let alone a plane ticket. I was detained and returned to the county jail. 3 hours later, I was taken to the room where my lawyer and Haley were sitting. He told me what was going to happen next and explained that Dad had finally hired a lawyer for me, whom I would meet the next morning. He explained once again what I was accused of and told me not to say a word to anyone, not even my cellmate. Then he left me alone with my wife. "Oh, Ham," she exclaimed as he left the room. "I'm so sorry for my role in this. I just feel terrible." What she said didn't make any sense, so I just sat there and looked at her. She seemed to have finally figured it out. "It was a joke, Ham," she wailed. "A stupid April Fool's joke? Why would you want to hurt him like that? It's funny when you love someone so much and trust them, or maybe it's just funny when I do that." She suddenly seemed overly dramatic to me, but she behaved no differently than usual. I couldn't decide if it was because I was so angry at her or something else, but I seemed to see right through her. "A joke?" I asked incredulously. "Why would that be? Why?" "I'm really, really sorry, Ham." At least her voice sounded guilty. "He said it would be funny, and our joke will be a success with the neighbors. He told me that everyone knew that you were a big tough guy in high school. I was so proud of our house, of you at the barbecue, that I probably foolishly agreed. After what happened, I realized that it was a stupid thing to do." "The stupid thing to do," I replied, "would be to do as you described. Except that I saw you two kissing. It wasn't the first time." He put his hand on your bare chest. "The April Fool's prank won't work, Haley." She studied my face for a few moments, trying to find at least something that could confirm my words. She didn't see anything that could calm her down. "Why did you have to pretend to be a real soldier?" She changed direction. "You're in big trouble, Ham. He will need surgery on his nose. His ribs are broken because you trampled him into the floor. I heard from his brother that he lost both testicles and may have chronic Peyronie's disease. 2 people can play this game." "You were in the hospital to visit your lover, weren't you?" I chuckled. Haley was clearly annoyed that I wasn't as mentally retarded as she thought. "We have serious problems." Her voice got louder. "I thought I'd see if I could help you by reminding him that we both started with this stupid prank. He doesn't care. He wants blood. He said you're going to jail and he'll be waiting for you when you get out." "Great," I sighed. "Now I have to worry about some crazy eunuch following me. Make sure he knows that my list of friends far exceeds his. Whatever happens to me, it will happen to him 3 times. "Stop talking macho nonsense, Ham," she told me. "We made a very big mistake, but you are facing jail time. I can't live like this. I've never seen you like this. I don't think I've ever seen anyone behave like that. Now I'm afraid of you." "You don't seem to notice the obvious, Haley," I said, bringing my face closer to hers. "Who said that I want to live with you? I'll let you stay in the house until I figure this out, but then you should make a plan for where you're going to live." "This is my house too." She became more and more defiant. "Our names are listed in the documents. You're my husband, and that's why you better get your head out of your ass, otherwise everything will go wrong for you." "Get out," I growled softly. At first she didn't move. Then I reached out to her and she jumped. Of course my wrist was handcuffed to a chair. Haley stood up, looking at me with, I can't say I've ever seen that look before. It was desperation or pity. She knocked softly at the door and then looked over her shoulder. "I'll be back in a few days, Ham, when you calm down enough." My future ex-wife suffered from hallucinations. Then I was sure that he had approached her. She took it as an adventure. Now she was trying to kick my ass. One minute she was begging, and the next minute she was threatening and demanding. I would never put up with this, even if I was put in jail. I may have made a mistake marrying her, but I'll be damned if she and the eunuch decided to break up. A few hours later, I was sitting in the same chair and meeting with Jonathan Turnus, the lawyer my cousin had hired. He was a big, tall guy with a full head of hair and an impressive appearance. I liked his no-nonsense approach. "Mr. Woodson has serious injuries," he informed me. "If you are found guilty, you face 3 to 5 years in prison. If we can prove that you were protecting your wife and home, well, that's the best thing that can happen. It will depend on the judge we choose. I think the best strategy is to put you in full protection mode. You saw the man who attacked your wife. This means that you weren't watching what was happening and just reacted. I had to agree with him. We talked about how to build a case around this defense and what I could have expected in court if I hadn't decided to plead guilty. There was no bail. I spent some time explaining what I wanted Mr. Turnus to tell my cousin. I planned to transfer the payments for the house to a separate bank account, but not pay the mortgage. Haley wouldn't have been able to afford it if she hadn't asked her parents for help. I was hoping to be free before the bank made a decision to collect the debt, but I wasn't going to keep paying for my wife to live there without money. This move will probably also encourage her to move elsewhere, perhaps to her parents or to a eunuch. It was different with work. Jared talked to one of my best friends at work, Darren McDonald. The printing house was small and privately owned. The absence of an employee is not good for business. If they fail to meet the deadlines, they will lose customers. Darren did everything he could to sort things out with the owners. He was successful, but only temporarily. The question of my employment was in the air. 4 days later, Haley came to me again, but I refused. I have no idea if she was upset, disappointed, or relieved. 2 days later, Mr. Turnus told me the details of the plea bargain, and I refused it. We were going to court. All this took almost 45 days. Haley was with my cousin Jared and my parents. At first, they sat together, probably out of solidarity. However, after the first week, I saw Haley only occasionally. When my parents visited the prison, they told me that she was angry because I refused to meet with her. While the prosecution was making its case, Mr. Turnus spoke to me during the morning break. "I need you to talk to your wife," he began. "During the trial, the jury pays attention to many things, Ronald. And when they see that your own wife does not support you, they begin to doubt. We need to present a united front. I know you're upset about what she did, but remember, our strategy is to make Mr. Woodson the aggressor and both of you the victims." I understood what he was talking about, and I was thinking the same thing myself. Damn it, if she could put on such a show, then so can I. Haley seemed worried to me, but maybe she was just exhausted. I couldn't say more, which was another sad discovery. "Hello, Ham," she said solemnly. "How are you holding up?" "It's okay," I told her without much emotion. "And you?" She didn't answer, but she seemed to be looking around the room, avoiding my gaze. "We're done, aren't we?" "What is it?" she finally asked. "I'm not sure," I shrugged. "We have a lot to figure out before I can answer this question. Maybe you can start with an explanation and stop these crazy April Fool's jokes?" "It's not what you think," she replied. "It was a joke. The problem is I can't figure out why I agreed to this in the first place. I know it looks ugly, how it must look, but I swear it was just one case. How can I make you believe me?" I thought about it, refraining from answering. I thought about it carefully in my cell. "Okay, Haley," I took a deep breath. "I will speak calmly and tell you the truth. I guess I owe you a lot. What I saw was not like what it was the first time. There was nothing awkward about it. Your eyes were closed. You had one arm around his neck and the other around his waist. You looked like old lovers. So, did you know him before he moved to the area? Or did you become friends in the few months that have passed since his arrival?" Haley tried to act calm. She swore that she had only met him a few months ago on a walk in the neighborhood that we had both been on. I didn't believe her. Her posture, her eyes, nothing seemed right to me. The worst part was that I saw her for who she was. I was wearing blinders when we fell in love and got married. Now I saw a selfish girl. The trial was ongoing and Haley was in court, probably at the insistence of my lawyer. The biggest problem was that all our neighbors turned their backs on me. Their testimony contradicted our planned defense. I guess I couldn't blame them. They didn't want to live on the streets with a madman. I can't bore you with the details because most of the time in court I didn't pay much attention to it. Mr. Turnus put on a great show talking about the chronology of events and how I reacted in a split second. In the end, it wasn't enough. I was convicted. I will never forget the look on my parents' faces. Even Haley was crying. 3 days later, I stood in front of the court to hear my verdict and everything the judge had to say. "Mr. Wilson," he cleared his throat, "a jury consisting of your neighbors found you guilty. Despite the fact that the incident occurred in your own home, the use of excessive force was established. I sincerely regret the cruel so-called prank committed by you, and I hope that the time spent in prison will serve as an example for you to reflect on. I hope you will learn to control your character which has manifested itself in other cases in order to become a useful member of society. I hereby sentence you to 1 year in state prison." He banged the hammer, and that was the end of it. I learned to control my temper during my first week in prison. My cellmate took me under his wing. He was a life convict who killed his wife and her lover in their marital bed, so I think he had a soft spot for me. I took a crash course on when, how, and where to use my pent-up anger. The others soon realized that of all the fresh meat, I probably wasn't worth the effort. During the trial, I served exactly 54 days in the county jail. Mr. Turnus told me that it should be credited at the end of the 1-year term. He gave me the opportunity to appeal, but given the circumstances that I was already broke, it was best to just serve my time. I had been there for almost 2 months when Haley finally visited me. I did not expect to ever see her again as she found out that I had not paid the money for the house. I expected her to propose to me, paid for by her parents. What she came to say exceeded all my expectations. "Ham, there's no point beating around the bush," she began. "I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby." I think my inaction gave her the opportunity to continue. "Isn't that wonderful, baby? We'll become parents, and you'll have plenty of time to chat with our child." "Whose child is this?" I asked with a vacant look. She turned to look. "What the hell are you talking about?" She pulled herself together and went on the offensive. "I just told you. I've never had sex with anyone, you bastard." "I'm not buying it," I said coldly. Haley started crying fake tears. "What happened to you, Ham?" she screamed. "You're breaking my heart." I just sat and stared at an empty wall. Finally, Haley got up and headed for the door. "Ham, I need you to find a way to pay for the house. We need housing now more than ever. Talk to your parents, please." Instead, I contacted my lawyer. When I told him what my supposedly loving wife had said, he shook his head. "Did she tell you how far along she is?" I didn't ask, and I didn't pay attention. "What do you want to do?" "What is it?" he asked gloomily. "I want her examined as soon as possible. Give me the name of the divorce lawyer." "Ron." He put a fatherly hand on my shoulder. "You can't even afford to pay my bill, and you don't know if you'll stay at work when you get out. How about I find the forms online, fill them out, add an extra hour to your bill, and you try to get her to sign? Of course I can apply for paternity papers. Prison overcrowding is a problem even in Louisiana. Surprisingly, I didn't look the gift horse in the mouth. I was released after serving 3 months plus 54 days, I think. The only downside was that I had to wear an ankle bracelet for the first 2 months of my probation period. It was pure luck that I was released. In 5 days, the bank would have changed the locks on the house. Haley pretended to be very happy that I was coming home. The first thing I did after sending Haley out for pizza was talk to my cousin. He told me that the money from my second account only covers about 90% of the total mortgage debt, minus interest. He's going to have to do his bit if I want to keep the house. I quickly agreed. When Haley returned, we sat and ate quietly. "We're going to lose the house." I pretended to be sad about it. "I found out about it today." "I don't want to talk about anything tonight," she said with false hope. "We can deal with the consequences of this mess tomorrow. Tonight after dinner, all I want to do is make love to my husband. It's been too long." She was undoubtedly full of surprises. I knew that she had received the letter and that Turnus had warned her in advance that she was awaiting notification of paternity. I looked at her as if I didn't even know her. "I know you got the notification. We won't have bedtime love until I see the results that confirm that this is my child." Haley stammered and whined. She screamed that I was being cruel. She threw a tantrum, and it didn't go unnoticed. I started to understand what acting was like, and it made me sick. Then I thought about my cellmate and his teachings. The chair flew out from behind me as I jumped up in anger. "Leave me alone." I clenched my fists. "When I see the results, we can talk about our future, but not before." Haley turned pale and headed for our bedroom without even taking her eyes off me. Later, I went to open the bedroom door and she shouted, "Sleep on the couch." The next day, after Haley left for work, or whatever she was doing at that time, I called the bank after my cousin who was making the payment. I wanted to know the amount of the payout. Then I found a realtor, Mrs. Alice Burns, who came to see me in the afternoon. No matter how much of a monster Haley had become, she still kept the house in perfect order. We would have earned a little more than the house was worth, maybe $30,000, maybe a little less. But I could have paid Mr. Turnus, so that was fine with me. I asked the realtor to install the sign as soon as possible. Then I offered an additional percentage if she could sell it in 30 days. I already had a pretty clear idea of how the paternity test would go. She smiled and told me that thank you, but no. She was good enough to sell it. Haley came home from work late. I had a feeling that the eunuch had not fully recovered yet, and I thought about it. Haley came and handed me an envelope with the results of the examination. If she had even noticed the for sale sign, she would probably have thought that the bank had put it up. "I hope you're happy," she grumbled. "I'm so mad at you, Ham, that my eyes are running away. I have no idea how you're going to make it up to me, but it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of sucking up." I thoughtfully tried to figure out what I found in her at all. "Thank you." That was my monosyllabic answer. Later, when I was sitting and watching a football match, I opened the results. I couldn't believe my eyes. Is it possible that she just took the results and didn't ask the doctor any questions? Or was she hoping that I wouldn't read the report? The results showed that the probability that I was the father was 2.03%. Sometime later, she waltzed into the living room and sat down on the other end of the sofa. "Can we stop all this and talk a little about our future?" she asked very sweetly. "About what future?" I replied calmly. She looked at me strangely. For a second, I thought she just misunderstood me. "Now that you know the baby is yours," she said, as if she didn't understand my question, "we need to clarify the situation and continue to live our lives." "It says in these documents that I'm not the father," I said matter-of-factly. "What are you up to? Another prank?" She immediately went on the defensive. "Ham, what the hell?" She spoke louder. "It says here that you are the father, 98%. I handed her the document. "I don't believe you're that stupid, Haley." I went out to the backyard. Haley never came out, and as usual, the bedroom door was locked when I checked later. The next day, Haley didn't come home after work. It seemed to me that something was wrong in the house, and after further inspection, it turned out that most of her belongings were missing. There was a note on the TV remote saying that she had left. She was sorry. Yes, yes, yes. I was already starting to wonder if I was going through Groundhog Day. The 1st of April was repeated over and over again. Sitting there without her in the house, I began to think about something. Could the eunuch have coached her to try to incite me to violence? Maybe send me back to prison so they can enjoy each other and keep most of my stuff. It made sense, but why bother? Why didn't she just run away with him? I texted her, "Coward." Or is she crazy after all? I thought it would be useful to get this over with. It was then that I realized that she had never respected me. She thought I was so stupid that she could keep playing with me until I was exhausted. I was sure that Woodson had encouraged her to do this. It was a quiet evening at home. I had no idea that while in prison I had already written Haley off. I knew I didn't like her and I didn't like her. But it was nice just to sit at home without her. It didn't last long. It was 2:03. That's what my old-fashioned alarm clock showed. I could barely see the clock through the smoke. I jumped out of bed and ran through the bedroom door into the hallway. There was a lot of smoke. Damn, the house was on fire. It got to the point where it was no longer possible to try to put it out. I would have died of smoke poisoning before I even started putting it out. I ran back to the bedroom and opened the window to assess the situation. A hydrangea bush grew under the window. It wasn't much, but it could soften the blow if I could land and roll over. It was a big if. Instead, I decided to wrap my upper body in a blanket after pulling on my pants. I didn't have time. 1, 2, 2.5. It was much hotter down at ground level. I rolled over, but not the way I imagined myself in the movies. Probably not suitable for a stuntman. When I got up, it was easy to see that I had sprained my ankle. I pulled my phone out of my pants pocket and dialed 911, but sirens were already heard in the distance. After a lot of activity, I sat down on the back step of the ambulance, bandaging my ankle. When they first took me to their tower, my ankle bracelet went over the fence. The police were kind enough to disconnect him, and then a pleasant surprise awaited me. At first, I didn't recognize her in the sheriff's cap. It was Marley. "How are you, Ham?" she beamed. Because I looked at her like she was crazy, her smile faded. "I'm sorry, Ham," she apologized. "This is not the time to joke. I'm glad you're okay. We talked about the fire. She told me that she had been following my case, and even in prison, she had done everything possible to keep me safe and out of trouble. It was unexpected, but it gave me a warm feeling. In fact, maybe it was just because of Marley's presence." "Do you think she did this, Ham?" She seemed unsure as she asked the question. "I do not know," I said honestly. "She just moved out after she tried to lie to me about her child's paternity test. I think she's on the verge of a mental breakdown. Can we talk about this tomorrow? She didn't wait for an answer. I need to change your location right now. You're still under house arrest even though you don't have a home anymore. She wasn't joking when she knocked on my cousin's door at 8:30. She took me there after all the questioning and the paramedics examined my ankle. Marley was all business when we went into the kitchen and I offered her coffee. We're checking on your ex. I mean, your wife and maybe this Dane Woodson for setting your house on fire. I need details of what has happened since you got out of prison. So it was deliberately set up? I asked for clarification. It's still under investigation, so I can't say much, but yes, there were suspicious chemical accelerators. I had a copy of the paternity test that my lawyer demanded, and it turned out that she was pregnant with someone else's child. I can't say for sure that it was Woodson, but the probability is very high, unless she was messing with different guys while I was in prison. He also threatened to kill me for the beating I gave him and for which I ended up in prison. We all know about it, she admitted. The dumb bastard said that in his affidavit that first day at the hospital. Jared was still in bed, but Marley leaned over to me like she was sharing a secret. Hammer, if it was him, well, I'd like to know if I could help you with your situation. Like what? I asked in surprise. They would have put him in jail. For this? Listen, you were like that. You helped me out of a very difficult situation. She paused. I'll never forget what you've done for me. I feel obligated to you. This feeling is compounded by the fact that part of your track record was related to what you did to keep me from being raped. I was just looking at her. I was partly mesmerized by her beauty and smile. She was as gorgeous as ever. Arson is one of the most difficult crimes to prove, she began in another direction. Not because we don't have good criminologists, but because good lawyers know how to get around them. If your wife could have been involved in this, she continued, we want to try to fix it. Do you think you could help with that? Marley installed a video surveillance system in Jared's living room. My cousin had to pay for the equipment so he could claim it was a home security system, and so it wouldn't be seen as a covert operation. He was glad to do it. According to the plan, I had to invite my wife to my place under the pretext of a possible reconciliation. I had to wait for Marley to tell me when it would happen. She promised me some satisfaction after the meeting was over. Not the kind of satisfaction she said. It made me wonder if I had a chance to get a date with Marley. She still seemed to have feelings for me. Despite this, she taught me what to say and what to ask when I meet Haley. Our goal was to make her so angry that she would tell us something she didn't want to. Haley's short temper could help to achieve a more or less decent confession. Even if Marley and I were just friends, I wouldn't mind. I lost my job and my house, and I was found guilty of a crime. Fortunately, the realtor broke our contract. I wanted to continue living my life. A week later, I got a call. Marley rehearsed for a few minutes before giving me the green light. Haley seemed to really want to talk. Maybe it will work. Jared stayed away from his house to give us space and hopefully calm Haley down. When she arrived, I handed her a beer and we sat down facing each other in the living room. Her skinny jeans and loose top were also a trick. At least I've learned something. To begin with, I took a deep breath. Marley and I discussed a strategy on how to look restrained, depressed, and ready to give in. How are you doing, Haley? I began. Not really, Ham, she replied. I miss you. I'm really sorry about the house. I know the bank was selling it anyway, but he and I had so many good memories. I hope I have some good news, Ham. Maybe this will help me start remembering something new. She must be delusional, or she really thought I was that dumb. Even the sight of her made me sick. We'll see, I said miserably. I think we need to be honest first. If I can't find a way to trust, then there's no point. She nodded hesitantly. I need to know, I asked slowly. How did it all start with you? Her gaze became more intense, and she held back a smile, glad that I asked a question about her boyfriend, and not about the fire. That's when I realized that we had her in our hands. All right, Ham, she replied. You're calm, aren't you? Won't you lose your temper? I told her that I was calm. He started flirting with me at a neighborhood party last month. She was rubbing her hands in her lap, which was a clear sign of nervousness. It was also what she did when she lied. I flirted back, Ham, she admitted. I'm sorry, I was amazed. He is handsome and made me feel good with his compliments. He came by a few times when you were at work. I was still playing the part. Was it in our bed or somewhere else? Haley started crying. She could barely stand on her feet, and we were, in fact, just getting started. In our bed, she sobbed. I'm sorry, I know it's painful to realize. I do not know why I did it. She was good. I have to give her credit. It was, to put it mildly, discouraging that what I witnessed at that time I had already seen before in my assumptions. We did it again, at his house, she continued, before the party. And at the party, I asked, was this done to hint at this? Maybe, she shrugged. I don't know. He was there when I came out of the bathroom and kissed me without warning. I told him to stop, that we can be easily detected. When he leaned towards me again, he said, just tell the Neanderthal that this is an April Fool's joke, which I did. And you decided that the best strategy is not to take your husband's side? I needed to focus on her feelings for me and her subsequent actions. I didn't know what to do, she finally sounded honest. I was crazy about him. Everyone looked at me in surprise. Pity. I really came to see you, but you were so angry. I was scared. I didn't think he would follow through with his accusations. Then I visited him in the hospital to try to convince him to drop the charges, and found out what irreparable damage you had done to him. And then you found out you were pregnant, I said by way of statement. What makes you think I'm going to do this? I was desperate, Ham, she cried even harder. Everything was falling apart. After you were convicted, I decided to go to him and ask if he would take me in and raise our child together. I'm so sorry. I thought if you stayed there for a year, then everything would be over between us. It was a moment of truth. So I went out earlier and you helped him set fire to my house? Have all your grandiose plans gone to waste? She was on the verge of hysteria. I gave him the key, baby. That's all. He promised you wouldn't be home when he did it. That's all. I looked at her with contempt, and I know she felt it. Well, it just shows who you can trust. The ambiguity made her wonder if I was referring to her or to myself. I'm sorry, Ham, she said. I totally screwed up. Can you forgive me? No, I said, getting up. I can't. I made a mistake bringing you here. I was hoping for a miracle. Anything he could grab onto. You've confirmed the worst. You're not... She realized her mistake and panicked. Don't drag me into what you're going to do, Ham. You are welcome. I need to think about the baby. Don't ruin the child's life, too. I walked her to the door and then texted Jared. He, in turn, contacted Marley. I took a cold beer and sat down heavily on a chair, wondering if it wouldn't have been better to actually agree to Haley's request. It took only a few nanoseconds to realize that everything that was happening was the result of her actions. An hour later, I heard the doorbell ring. At first, I thought Jared had forgotten his key. Instead, there was a small cardboard box on the mat. Maybe it was a bomb. I examined it carefully and then opened the package. Inside, I found a note and a disposable phone. The note said, "Watch the video, then destroy the phone, the box, and the note." I sat down at the table with pleasure. The note included a 6-digit password for the phone. There were only 3 apps on the homepage, and I opened the video. It was dark. The camera seemed to be pointing at the ground at someone's feet. I could hear the muffled screams of a man, probably gagged. From the sound of it, he was begging for his life. The lights came on, and a fenced-in area filled with what looked like dirt came into view. A crying man came into view, naked except for some rag in his mouth. 2 other men dragged him to the fence and pulled out the gag. "Help me, help!" "Stop it," he shouted. Another voice spoke, apparently off-screen. "Go on," he chuckled. "No one will help you here." The camera was mounted on a table or post. A 3rd man came into view. I couldn't believe it. It was Billy Ray. He helped 2 others lift Dane Woodson and throw him over the fence. Woodson behaved like a marlin being rolled behind a boat, twisting and wagging from side to side. Damn, this guy could scream. Dane landed in the mud with his bare bottom, and then I saw and recognized this movement. These damn guys took Woodson to one of the local alligator farms. There were 4 of them in a 20-minute drive from Nattlebany. I laughed, thinking, I hope they didn't take the good old Dane to the one who charged for family excursions. 3 alligators, one of which was very large, attacked the poor guy. Dane was desperately kicking the big beast at his feet. The other 2 were slowly approaching from both sides. That jerk punched one of them in the eye. Obviously, Dane had never fought alligators. Everyone knows that they need to be punched in the face. It took a few minutes. Alligators are always busy with themselves and do not work in a team. Billy Ray came over and took the camera, bringing it closer to the scene. "Hello, Hammer," he said happily. "This is for changing my life at school. The fact that you stopped what Marley and I were doing changed my life. I still have to kick your ass. This guy is here and he won't bother you. Do you hear?" The big man finally reached Woodson's hip, and his mighty jaw landed with a loud snap on the struggling man's stomach and shook from side to side, almost tearing the good old Dane in half. The other two quickly dealt with the upper part of his body. I watched the video one more time, then threw everything into Jared's fireplace and flipped the switch on the wall. The next day, Jared showed the detectives the surveillance footage. 3 days later, Haley was arrested. The media suggested that a certain Dane Woodson, a lover, ran away from the city, leaving his pregnant ex-wife to shoulder this burden. 3 months later, Haley was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison. It would have been less if I hadn't been at home during the fire. She gave her little girl up for adoption. I never visited her. A week before Christmas, Jared and I had a barbecue. Darren McDonald and his young bride were there. A few of my former classmates from school spent most of the day playing cornhole. Mr. Turnus and his wife Julie stopped by for a while. I think he did it because I was still making payments. Billy Ray was also present. He took me aside and explained what happened to him after I prevented him from making the worst mistake of his life. Let's just say he was happy to oblige. Poor Elmer died 5 years earlier when a crane collapsed on him while he was working on an oil platform. Later that night, Marley and I were lying in bed. It turns out that this lovely lady was just as interested in me getting healthy again as I was in her becoming my new girlfriend. Oh, I'm sorry, a woman. She's a cop after all. You know, baby, I said as she pressed her head against my chest, panting. I feel like this is the first day of a new life. Our new life. She didn't answer right away. I'm thinking. She lifted her pretty face to look at me. I think April 1st was your first day. Who am I to argue? End.